Intermittent fasting is a dietary measure by which there are windows of time that you are eating and other windows of time that you are not eating. There are many different ways to intermittent fast, from a time-restricted fasting where you eat normally within a certain time window in the day, and then you stop eating during the rest of the time of the day. There's also alternate day fasting, where you eat a normal diet one day and then eat very, very little or nothing at all on the next day. There's 5 and 2 fasting, where you eat a normal diet 5 days a week and fast 2 days a week. There are many different ways to fast, and the benefits are also multiplicative. We know that intermittent fasting can increase our metabolic flexibility. This means that we become more primed and able to use fats and ketones as an energy source instead of simply burning glucose all of the time for our energy. We also know that intermittent fasting reduces the amount of advanced glycolation end products in our body. And these AGEs do exactly that. They age us. So intermittent fasting is also associated with reduced chronic inflammation, which can put you at a reduced risk for Alzheimer's disease and arthritis. Intermittent fasting is generally appropriate for everyone, especially those people who are experiencing any problems with metabolic disease. But it's not perfect for every single person. In my interview today with Dr. David Jockers, he and I discuss how we can effectively transition into a fasting type diet, how eating in an intermittent way has an impact on our gut health, our dysbiosis, how it can impact our insulin levels, and how ketones can actually help to protect the brain. Let's get to the show. Welcome to the Lindsey Elmore Show, a podcast for people who deserve to be healthy, with honest, open, and enlightening conversations with doctors, thought leaders, creatives, and spiritual gurus. You'll walk away with simple and tangible tips and tricks that allow you to live your healthiest life so you can pursue your dreams, overcome obstacles, and leave your mark. Dr. David Jockers is a doctor of natural medicine who runs one of the most popular natural health and wellness websites, which has gotten more than 1 million monthly visitors. His work has been seen on popular media sites such as the Dr. Oz Show and the Hallmark Home and Family Network. Dr. David is the author of the best-selling The Keto Metabolic Breakthrough book and The Fasting Transformation. He is a world-renowned expert in the area of ketosis, fasting, and functional nutrition. He is also the host of the popular Dr. Jockers Functional Nutrition podcast. Dr. David Jockers, welcome to the Lindsey Elmore Show.
Oh, thanks so much, Lindsey. A really honor to be on with you.
I have been going through my own intermittent fasting journey for a few months now. And because around Christmas time, I was gifted a scale, a body fat scale, visceral fat scale, all of the things for Christmas. And I hopped on it and realized I was the heaviest that I had ever been in my entire life. And if you don't put the brakes on that process, even if you're not overweight, even if you're not obese, it just continues to compound over the years. And so I had been hearing a lot about how we can optimize our metabolism, make our body more resilient when we limit the number of hours that we eat during the day. So I started with 12. I did Dr. Alejandro Younger's Clean 7, which has a 24-hour fast in there. And I've kind of settled into a routine of about 16 to 18 hours a day. I just don't eat. And I'm not super strict about it because I think that's one of the things that goes awry with health is when we get really strict about it. But for me, I know that the intermittent fasting, or as some people like to call it, intermittent eating, puts me into a mindset that helps me to make even more good decisions about my health, because you're not constantly getting pulled in all of these different directions by the constant call of food. So talk to us a little bit about why you started researching intermittent fasting. What is it? How does it play out for the average person? What does a day look like? And what are some of the benefits to our health?
Well, intermittent fasting, Lindsey, is really one of my favorite topics. And the way that I discovered it was in 2005. So I actually was a personal trainer in my early 20s, and I was always health conscious. My mom is actually a naturopath. But I always had gut problems, but I could, basically get them under control on my own. And then when I was in my early 20s, all of a sudden it hit, just basically I developed irritable bowel to the point where I lost 30 pounds. Right. And I was about 165. So I dropped down to 135, and I was still trying to eat a lot. I used to eat 6 meals a day. I had to eat, have a protein shake before I went to bed, wake up in the morning, have a big breakfast. And I thought I had to do that in order to maintain my muscle mass. And then I started losing weight, even though I was trying to lift weights. I would have terrible bloating, gas, constipation. I would have just massive gut pain. And, during that process, it really took me about a year and a half of learning a lot about health. And I went on an elimination diet. I read a book called The Maker's Diet by a friend of mine, Jordan Rubin. He's now a friend. And I started changing my diet. And that made a big difference. But I actually noticed, and I was a big breakfast guy back in these days. And I actually noticed that when I stopped eating breakfast and I would drink a lot of water in the morning, I felt significantly better. And I started gaining my weight back. And I had never heard the term intermittent fasting. Nobody was talking about this, but I just started gaining my weight back. And I would drink a ton of water between the time I woke up and and let's say noon or 1 o'clock, and I wouldn't get hungry until roughly around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Then all of a sudden I would get really hungry. I would eat two, fairly big meals in roughly, like a 4 to 6 hour eating window. And during that process, I gained my weight back. I felt better than ever, had better energy, mental clarity, strength. I was in graduate school. I shot to the top of my class. I was struggling in the beginning. And, I just felt the best I ever felt. And it was funny because I was telling people it was the water, had to be the water. I was drinking all this water in the morning because I didn't know the benefits of intermittent fasting. But, it was later I discovered the research behind intermittent fasting, and it's incredible what it does. And so for me, somebody with gut issues, and, we know that when we're looking at health from a functional perspective, we have to look at what's happening with the gut. We also have to look at what's happening with your blood sugar and your insulin sensitivity. And fasting really hits both of those areas. So from a gut perspective, it takes stress off the gut. So our gut lining is one cell wall. And as opposed to our skin, which is like 20 different cells all the way down. And so we know that our skin, obviously if we get a large enough cut, we're going to bleed, right? Well, we don't have to have as much tension on our gut in order to break it open and create a condition called leaky gut. And so we've got this constant tension whenever we're eating. We have this constant tension on our gut. So when we actually intermittent fast, we take physical stress off the gut. And that's really important because for most people, their gut lining is really worn down. And if you were going to try to heal a sprained ankle, you wouldn't be, walking on it or running on it all day. You would rest it. And it's kind of the same thing with the gut. Now, fortunately, the gut heals a lot faster than your ankle does. In fact, studies on rats have shown that even a 24-hour fast like you did with the Clean 7, that 24-hour fast actually dramatically increases stem cell production in the intestinal lining. The intestinal lining, we replace those cells every 3 to 5 days. So just taking some stress off of it throughout the course of a day allows for a dramatic level of healing and repair for that gut lining. So that's one of the big things. It also enhances the microbiome. Believe it or not, microbiome researchers, when they talk about the health of the microbiome, they talk about the diversity of the microbiome, the amount of different species of bacteria. And for the most part, most clinicians, functional clinicians, talk about eating a rich array of prebiotic foods like leeks, onions, asparagus, in order to increase the diversity of the bacteria. And that is one way to increase the diversity. However, perhaps the most powerful way to increase the diversity is actually intermittent fasting, believe it or not. And it drives up a certain type of keystone bacteria called the Akkermansia muciniphila. Muciniphila means mucus loving. And so what protects the intestinal lining is this mucus membrane and in the intestines. And Akkermansia actually eats the mucus, stimulates a certain cell called the goblet cell, which increases the amount of mucus production. And the better our mucus production in the gut, the more resilience our gut has. That means the better our gut is able to handle the daily stressors from food, from pathogens, bacteria, different things, pesticides, herbicides that we're being exposed to, it is able to handle that stress and recover better when it has a good, healthy mucous membrane. And so intermittent fasting really helps with that. It also just drives down overall inflammation in the body as well. And then from a blood sugar perspective, when we're fasting, our blood sugar goes down and our insulin goes down. And insulin is our fat storage hormone. And insulin is a very important hormone because if we have high circulating blood sugar, the sugar molecules themselves are toxic. They actually bind to proteins and they create sticky proteins. We call these advanced glycation enzymes. Advanced starts with the A, glycation starts with a G, enzyme starts with the E, right? So it's AGE. So what do you think that does to our body? It ages us, right? And so insulin brings down the blood sugar so that we don't get this kind of neurotoxic effect, because those AGEs will damage our nerve cells or damage our kidneys, our blood vessels. This is why somebody with uncontrolled diabetes, they end up with peripheral neuropathy. They end up with kidney problems, kidney failure, heart disease, different things like that. So insulin brings that down, but insulin also triggers fat storage. It tells the body to store fat. It also turns on inflammation in the body. And so when we fast, we bring insulin down. When we bring insulin down, now that tells the body, okay, burn fat for fuel. So we start using fatty acids as a fuel source. And when we do that, fatty acids themselves are a great fuel source for like our muscles, our liver. Most of the cells in our body can use fatty acids for energy, but the brain can't. And the reason why is fatty acids are very large and they can't cross the blood-brain barrier. So when we are in a prolonged state of fasting, or if we're doing this on a regular basis and eating a diet that doesn't drive up insulin on a regular basis, like a lower carb diet, our body starts to create something called ketones because it realizes it's going to have times with low blood sugar and we need an alternative fuel source. And so we need some sort of fuel source to get into the brain because sugar, we may have periods of low blood sugar, and that's toxic for the brain. The brain cells start to die. So we create these ketones and they cross the blood-brain barrier. And ketones, the presence of ketones in the blood-brain barrier, in the brain, I should say, turns down inflammation. It actually shuts down this inflammatory pathway called the inflammasome, the neuroinflammasome. It's like shutting down the overall alarm. Let's say a window's open in your house, you set the alarm, boom, the window, the alarm's going off in your house. This is kind of what inflammation is. It's like this amplification effect, that takes place, especially in the brain, and when people experience inflammation in the brain, they experience things like depression. We used to think that was a neurotransmitter issue, but actually it's an inflammation issue in the brain, anxiety, irritability. If you're just irritable and you can't get that under control, right? You find it hard to get under control. That's a sign of inflammation in the brain fog. And then of course, long-term, we deal with issues like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's. So ketones really shut that down. And ketones are a very powerful energy source. So we produce a lot of energy from breaking down fat or ketones with very little metabolic waste. When we burn sugar for fuel, Sugar is a quick fuel source. We can create energy quickly, but it's really metabolically, it's dirty energy, right? Meaning that we're going to produce a lot of metabolic waste, a lot of free radicals, and that's going to drive up more inflammation. It's going to damage cells more. And so when we go through periods of fasting, right, we help turn on fat burning and the production of these ketones. And we teach our body to become what's called metabolically flexible. We're good at burning either sugar for fuel when we need to, like when we're exercising, but also good at burning fat when we're sleeping, for example, or if we're just sitting around working a desk job. We need to be burning fat during that period of time. For the most part, throughout the day, we should be burning primarily fat. And most people are not. Most people are stuck in sugar burning because they have chronically elevated insulin levels. And fasting is one of the best ways to get that insulin down. And when insulin's down, one other great thing happens. We turn on intracellular repair processes, something called autophagy. Autophagy means self-eating. And basically our body says, okay, we need fuel. So we can burn fat and produce fuel, but we also need amino acids and proteins because inside of our body, we've got all these different structures like enzymes. And within our cells, we have things like the mitochondria where we produce all the energy. And those things are primarily made of amino acids and protein. So we need another fuel. We need another form of amino acids if we're not getting it in from our diet. So our body will actually go in, and the innate intelligence within us, this is how amazing our body is, Lindsey. It knows where the damaged mitochondria are, where the damaged cells are. And so it starts to break down cells that have become damaged. And all of us have damaged cells. We all have damaged intracellular organelles. Like the mitochondria lives within a cell. It's called an organelle within a cell. And it becomes damaged because the process of producing energy creates free radicals, and those free radicals will damage the different organelles like the mitochondria. So over time, these things start to rust, right? Think about it like a rusting. They start to age and they become what we call senescent or aged. And when they're senescent, they are basically less metabolically flexible. They're not good at, for example, using fat or ketones for fuel. They become stuck in sugar burning mode. We have immune cells, for example, that will become senescent, and they drive up inflammation in the body, and they also can contribute to autoimmunity. When people have autoimmunity, that's a sign of an overload of these senescent or aged cells. So when we go through kind of this period of fasting, we get insulin down for a period of time, our body will start to break down these senescent cells and these senescent organelles within the cell and take the raw materials and actually create newer, healthier mitochondria, newer, healthier cells. So it's kind of like taking out the trash. It's like recycling the cellular components to create healthier, more stress-resilient cells. So you become a lean, mean, fat-burning machine, and you also become an anti-aging machine where your body's actually throwing back your biological clock. So all your cells are functioning at a younger age when you practice regular intermittent fasting and perhaps periodic extended or partial fasting strategies.